Welcome to our Theological Institute here at Holy Family Catholic Church. We have 3 Wednesday evenings here before we go on summer break in July. So we're here this evening and next week and the following Wednesday, 3 Wednesdays that we're going to dedicate to talking about what it is that's happening in independent Catholicism this year. Have you heard that this year is the 300th anniversary of independent Catholicism? We find ourselves, let me just continue the board here. If this is 2024, what was 300 years ago? 300 years ago would have been, 1724. So we're talking about an era even before the United States of America was formed, before there was a United States of America. We're going to take a step back in time from 2024, 300 years ago, to 1724. Independent Catholicism springs from an event in 1724. October 1724. If we wanted, when October comes, we could be celebrating, having a special celebration for the 300th anniversary of what we're doing. What we're doing, when we started here at Holy Family, we referred to it as Father Jamie's Church. Hey, I'm going to Father Jamie's Church. It isn't Father Jamie's Church. Father Jamie's Church, our community, is part of something much larger than ourselves. So that we understand some of the context here. So independent Catholicism, we're going to put IC for independent. Wait a minute. We'll make it a little larger. Independent Catholicism is, if we wanted to imagine this as part of a larger circle, help me out, what are these? Concentric circles. So independent Catholicism is part of Catholicism. We are Catholics. What is the biggest Catholic Church? What's the biggest group within Catholicism? The Roman Catholic Church. So we'll put them here. There's the Roman Catholic Church. We are not them. They are not us. We're separate from them. But we are as Catholic as there. There are other Catholic groups as well. Groups like the Orthodox Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church is some 1 billion people throughout the world. The Orthodox Catholic Church, maybe some 300 million people throughout the world. So it's smaller, but it's still part of this Catholic tradition. In fact, it was the Orthodox Church that excommunicated the Roman Catholic Church in what year? 1054. Remember some of that history? And then what's going to happen is within this independent Catholic world, there are various churches that are going to arise that are independent from Rome and from Constantinople that are part of this independent Catholic world. So we're just going to draw here, independent Catholicism is this circle. Within independent Catholicism, the first independent Catholic Church is what we refer to as Old Catholicism. Have you heard that term before? Old Catholics? What does that term mean? When the Roman Catholic Church in 1870 formulated papal infallibility, that was the last straw for a lot of people who said the Roman Catholic Church has created a new teaching. In all the history of Catholicism, we've never believed that the Pope was infallible. In fact, it's papal infallibility. The other one was universal papal jurisdiction, meaning that the Pope is head of all of the earth, of all the world. Universal papal jurisdiction. The Pope is head of all the world? No. Do you remember back in the ancient times? We didn't believe the Pope was the head of everyone. The Pope was the head of the Church of Rome, just as other bishops were the head of their dioceses. When we came together, the Pope always chaired the meeting. So the Pope was referred to as the primus inter pares, a fancy Latin phrase, simply meaning the first among equals. The bishops are all equals. But the Bishop of Rome presides, is the chairperson of the meeting, because he is the primus inter pares. He's the first among equals. We gave some honored status to the Church of Rome. Old Catholicism then, when the Roman Catholic Church started deviating from some of these ancient beliefs and created this new religion, from the old Catholic perspective, they were creating a new religion, a new Catholic religion. And so they said, we are going to go back to the beliefs of the ancient church. And they referred to themselves as what? I hate the translation, but they referred to themselves as Old Catholic.
Okay.
And so this Old Catholic movement is centered around a city in the Netherlands called Utrecht, where now there are various churches that come together as part of the Union of Utrecht of Old Catholic churches, where we have the Old Catholic Church of the Netherlands and the Old Catholic Church of Germany and the Old Catholic Church of Switzerland and Austria and on and on. That's the Old Catholic tradition. We are not Old Catholic, but there are bishops and priests in our movement who say we are Old Catholics. We're not, but they say that because that's how some people understand. They understand independent Catholics and Old Catholics as being the same thing. When Old Catholicism went to England, there's an interesting story because there was a man named Arnold Harris Matthew who went to the Archbishop of Utrecht and said, I'm here in England, but we want to be Old Catholics in England. So the Archbishop of Utrecht authorized him to take the Old Catholic Church to England. The only challenge was, once they got to England, they decided, you know what? We're just going to be independent. So within this independent Catholic circle, we had the Old Catholic churches. Now we had what was happening in England at that time. And when those in England and other places came to the United States, we now have what we refer to in the United States as independent Catholicism.
Is that because of a shared English language?
More than anything, it's simply our way of distinguishing ourselves from Old Catholics. What happens is these Old Catholic churches are united in the Union of Utrecht, and they have national churches, the Church of Germany and Switzerland and Netherlands and Austria, etc. Here in the United States, we don't have a single church. And part of that goes back to our American spirit of independence, which is what we saw in England as well, right? I don't need to be part of you. If I don't like something that you say or you do, I just go off and be part of another group. Here in the United States, independent Catholics have yet to organize ourselves into like a national body. It's one of my pet projects in my free time. In the meantime, and then we'll come to Deacon Stephen, in the meantime, with these independent Catholics then, what we here at Holy Family, I've attempted to brand us in a different way since 2021 as inclusive Catholics, simply as a recognition that within these independent Catholics, there are some that believe what we believe here in Holy Family, but there are others that don't ordain women or who have different views on married clergy or LGBTQ issues. They're not like us. Follow me? They have different views. And if you're excluding women, then you're not exactly like Holy Family in Austin, Texas. You're different. We are inclusive. We're trying to follow in Jesus' footsteps. We're not going to exclude women. Women were a fundamental part of the order of the church, and women belong to the ordained ministry of the church for centuries. We're not excluding women. If you exclude women, you may be independent Catholic, but you are not inclusive Catholic. And some of the people who've been here, who've come through Holy Family in the past and even spent some time, considerable time here at Holy Family, now find themselves in jurisdictions that don't ordain women. We love them, but there's something different about them than the spirit that we have here at Holy Family. Deacon Stephen?
So because we don't have, like here in America, we don't have like a national organization. Is that why even within that little circle of independent Catholicism, from what I've seen, they still kind of look at us like, like little brother, sister, like little annoying siblings, like don't really like, we're not in full communion with everybody. Is that why? Because we're not.
Yeah, we're not
Organized like
organized.
that?
We are not organized.
But how can we? I don't know.
And so the challenge for the Union of Utrecht of Old Catholic Churches, or anyone else who's in communion with them, including the Philippine Independent Church, some 6 to 8 million people, they say, in the Philippines, we're not in full communion with them. Part of the reason is because we can't organize ourselves. The Philippine Independent Church looks at all of us and they say, we're like the redheaded stepchildren. I hate to use that expression, but with whom do they talk? Because we're scattered and there's no organizing principle. Who do they speak with to build a relationship with American clergy and communities?
And that word
Primus inter pares, the first
when
one
I see
equals.
that word, when I've done my research on different organizations within the Independent Catholic movement, there are people who call themselves prime, and I see that word and I see primate. I've seen some people. What is it? I can't find out what exactly a primate is.
So what becomes fascinating, and it's something we're going to talk about during our summer school in July, is that typically the church has 3 orders of ministry. There are 3 ordained ministries in the church. What are the 3 ordained ministries in the church? The sacrament of holy order. That would be, what are you ordained to first? That would be deacons, the diaconate. After that, you're ordained a priest, and the fullness of the priesthood is known as the episcopate. So that would be bishops. So every single person within this movement, within the Catholic Church, is one of these 3 things. You're either a deacon, if you're ordained. If you're not ordained, you're a lay person, and we love lay leaders are the backbone of the church. We love our lay leaders. But if you've been ordained, you're either a deacon or a priest or a bishop. What becomes fascinating in our movement is when people start to assume titles for themselves, because no one gives them these titles. Follow me? The Pope doesn't write on a piece of parchment, I now name you the primate of Indianapolis, Indiana, to anyone in our movement. Follow me? But within our movement, we'll see people who take on titles like Archbishop, which means something in the Roman Catholic Church. In the Roman Catholic Church, if you're a bishop who's ahead of other bishops, like in the San Antonio area, San Antonio has an archbishop with different other dioceses surrounding it that sort of report to the archbishop and are under his care. It makes sense to have an archbishop. To have an archbishop in Independent Catholicism, think of some of the archbishops you may know, especially if there's no other bishop. Got news for you, you're not an archbishop. With all due respect, you're a bishop. But I totally get that you're assuming that title for yourself. It would be like Father Jamie coming to Mass one day and giving himself another title. From now on, you will call me Monsignor Matthias.
We are getting older.
Right. Monsignor, we'll put that on the list of assumed titles in here, only because many of us work with, our friends. We see Father Oliver over in Sierra Leone, and we notice on his Facebook page that he refers to himself as Monsignor Oliver Lehman Williams. Beautiful. Love that title, but who gave it to you? Follow me? Archbishop. Deacon Stephen's using another title that we hear within the movement of primate. Fascinating. Who gave you that title? These are like elevating titles now. Follow me? A title above that would be patriarch. Someone who's taken the title of patriarch or matriarch. Shoot, that's a historically rich title. But who gave you that title? Within our movement, all too often, people assume titles. They take titles. They give themselves titles. Well, I'm going to start calling myself Archbishop now. Say what?
Isn't a patriarch more like Eastern Orthodox?
Excellent question. The patriarchs, when we hear that, there were 5 historic patriarchs in the church, simply meaning of all of these bishops, there are 5 that belong to historical sees that are significant, like Jerusalem. The Bishop of Jerusalem was referred to as a patriarch of the church. Other patriarchs, Rome, Constantinople, Antioch, which was the community that many claimed was founded by Peter, and finally Alexandria in Egypt. Those were the 5 traditional patriarchs of the church.
A couple months ago, didn't the Pope take a picture with all these people? a big ceremony with everybody, all the patriarchs of the church.
That is a good question, only because there's a time, especially with the patriarch. So there, if you start looking things up on Wikipedia, it becomes fascinating because you'll find two patriarchs in the same city. You'll find the patriarch of Constantinople, who's the head of the Orthodox Church, and you'll find the Roman Catholic patriarch of Constantinople, who's a person within this system. They're not going to have the people of Constantinople reporting to this patriarch. They have their own patriarch of Jerusalem.
Are they in communion now, though, the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church?
Are they in communion? They're certainly in dialogue.
Right.
In full communion. So we have different terms that distinguish these sorts of things. And typically the fullest type of communion would be full communion. We'll just abbreviate that. Before that, there are other types of agreements that churches enter into, essentially saying, we recognize certain things about you, certain sacraments, etc., but we're not in full communion. You are not us and we are not you. We're not sending our folks to pray with you.
I still
So-
love that word inclusive.
Mario says he loves that word inclusive. It's a powerful word. When we joined here, Holy Family, we struggled with how to self-identify, how to brand ourselves. We started out calling ourselves Holy Family American Catholic Church. Father Libardo had a real problem with that because he said there's a real oxymoron. You cannot be American Catholic because Catholic means universal. How can you both American and universal at the same time? And so as a result, we in our initial documents, we referred to ourselves as Holy Family American Catholic Church. But then the more that we spoke with Father Libardo and others about the topic, we were like, yeah, until the Roman Catholic Church starts calling all of its churches Roman Catholic Church, Cristo Rey, Roman Catholic Church, Santa Julia, Roman Catholic Church, San Jose, Roman Catholic Church, why should we have to distinguish who we are too? We had all sorts of initial conversations on that. And in the end, I was the one who strongly said, no, let's just call ourselves Holy Family Catholic Church. We are as Catholic as any other church in Austin. And if they want, they can use the word Roman to distinguish themselves. And maybe that'd be a cue for us to use other words to distinguish ourselves too. But in the meantime, we are all that. So we started off as American Catholic, and then we started to think of ourselves more as independent Catholics. In 2021, I experimented for a month on referring to our movement as autocephalous. And the challenge was that not enough people understood what that meant for it to be accepted. What is that? That's simply a fancy Greek term meaning self-headed. We have our own head. Who's the head of whatever jurisdiction or whatever church? You know, they don't report to someone else up the hierarchy like a pope or anything like that. Think of, we were with the American Catholic Church for 6.5 years. Archbishop William Johnson is autocephalous, meaning he doesn't report to anyone. So there are different people like us who reported to him, but he didn't report to anyone else. And so because there's so many autocephalous churches within this movement, it made sense to refer to us as autocephalous Catholicism, except for the fact that people don't understand that word. Which is why I sort of made the pivot in 2021 to think of ourselves, well, there's something different about us from those who exclude women and the LGBTQ community, etc. What's the difference? The difference is that we include folks that they exclude. So what if we were, proposed as a thought experiment, what if we would refer to ourselves as inclusive Catholics in contrast to all of these exclusive Catholics, both Roman Catholics and those who exclude even within our own inclusive Catholic, independent Catholic tradition.
I thought we were part of like Independent Catholic Church of North America.
We were part of the American Catholic Church in the United States, the ACCUS it was called. For 6.5 years, we were part of the ACCUS.
There's no such thing as Independent Catholic Church of North America.
There may be out there, that's not ringing a bell.
There's the Independent Sacramental movement.
Ah, there you go. So within this whole thing, if we're talking about concentric circles, there's another term that we refer to as the ISM, which stands for what? The Independent Sacramental Movement, which simply means that we are not the only independent people out there. There are independent Orthodox people. Orthodox people who say, I am Orthodox, but I'm not part of the structure set up by the Patriarch of Constantinople. There are also independent Anglicans who say, I'm Anglican or Episcopalian, but I'm not part of the Church of Canterbury. And so the ISM, if we were to create a model for that, essentially includes independent Catholics, independent Orthodox, independent Anglicans, others who self-identify as independent. We're all part of this larger movement that we call as the ISM, the Independent Sacramental Movement. You can find a Wikipedia page on that, the Independent Sacramental Movement.
Is our church part of the, like, Diocese of Los Angeles? I read somewhere.
No.
Because I know we have one bishop.
Our church does so. Here at Holy Family, our church doesn't even have a bishop.
Yeah.
It's one of the fascinating things. We invite bishops in to celebrate sacraments with us.
Mhm.
All right. So in May, we invited in Bishop John Luft, who is Father Brett's bishop, but he's not our bishop. In October, we'll invite in another bishop, Bishop Pablo Burson of the Ecumenical Catholic Communion. We'll invite him to celebrate confirmation. He's not our bishop, but we invite in bishops. Sister Maria?
Is the union, are the churches in the Union of Utrecht and the Philippine Independent Church like fully inclusive?
Ooh, fully inclusive?
Mhm.
I think the answer to that now would be yes. So they have ordained, when they ordained their first woman priest in the Union of Utrecht, there were more conservative churches that split and said, we can no longer be part of you. But the Union of Utrecht now ordains women. The Philippine Independent Church ordains and now consecrates women. They have their first female bishop. We still have not had a woman bishop of the Union of Utrecht of all Catholic Churches. We have had we now have our first woman bishop as of 2019 in the Philippines.
What about like LGBTQ members and do they?
LGBTQ members. So as of maybe 2021 or 2022, we saw the first trans priest ordained in the Philippine Independent Church. I haven't heard any news of that in the Union of Utrecht. That would be an interesting question to be able to ask them. Here in the United States, within the inclusive Catholic movement, we do have trans priests as well. Trans priests, trans deacons, trans religious. Shall we talk about the events of 300 years ago? We have a few notes that I've pulled together simply to be able to guide our thoughts here this evening. The question arises, what is inclusive or independent Catholicism? Is something that Father Jamie just made up. So we have here a bit of the context. Independent Catholicism is part of a larger phenomenon of the Independent Sacramental Movement, the ISM, which contains independent expressions of Orthodoxy, Anglicanism, Episcopalianism, as well as Catholicism. There are independent Catholics, independent Anglicans or Episcopalians, and independent Orthodox. The difference between independent and inclusive Catholicism, then, is that some independent Catholics continue to exclude women and the LGBTQIA community with the illusion of one day being reunited with Rome. There's a group of priests here in these United States, and one of their priests was with us for a time, who don't ordain women, partly thinking, we are not going to ordain women so that when Rome does, so that one day Rome is going to accept us. Got news for you people. As I pat them on the head, it sounds very condescending, but Rome is not going to be coming to you anytime soon to be in communion with you. You may as well go ahead and ordain women and have an open stance on these things, because why live in the illusion that Rome is going to accept you? Rome isn't going to accept you. Should we go back to 300 years ago? What's the context in Europe in 1724 that gave birth to independent Catholicism? Have you heard of a saint called Saint Willibrord? Gotta love that name, huh? Saint Willibrord was a Saxon missionary from England, from present-day England, who went over to Utrecht, and Utrecht became the center of Catholicism in Northern Europe. Amsterdam would later overshadow Utrecht, but that's because Amsterdam is a port city. So of course, it would become more populous and would become more a population center, and hence the capital of Netherlands rather than Utrecht. Utrecht is more inside the country. It's not on the port. And so Willibrord made his way to Utrecht in the Netherlands, where they established Catholicism. In the Roman Catholic Church in 1702, after Peter Cod administrated Utrecht, there was no bishop in Utrecht for over 20 years. So here we have Roman Catholics without a bishop for over 20 years. Imagine for a moment if there were no bishop in Austin and we couldn't get a bishop in for 20 years, how many people would be looking for sacraments that only a bishop can give? Things like confirmations. Imagine if we said to people here at Holy Family, oh, we don't have confirmations until 20 years from now. Come back in 20 years and maybe we'll be able to help you. That was the situation in the Netherlands. Many in Northern Europe were disenamored with the ultramontane pretensions of Rome. Ultramontane is simply a fancy word for beyond the mountains. Take a look at that map for a moment of Italy. Have you ever thought about this for a moment? Italy is separated from the rest of Europe by a mountain range. What are those mountains? The Alps. The Swiss Alps separate Italy from the rest of Europe. So if you're in Italy, sure, you're part of the Church of Rome and reporting to them. But imagine for a moment all the work that it would have taken 300 years ago to cross those mountains and get to Switzerland and Germany and the Netherlands and other places. Follow me? So the people on the northern side of the mountains were like, y'all do what y'all do in Rome. That's great. We love you. But you are not our Pope, our leader. Follow me? Because it was at this time that Rome was asserting its universal jurisdiction of the church, and which was fine for those on this side of the mountains. But for those on the other side of the mountains, they were saying, nah, it's not going to work for us on the other side of the mountain. We're not going to be ruled by some bishop on the other side of the mountains. We refer to that as ultramontanism, or those on the other side of the mountains. Clement the 11th issued a document called Unigenitus in 1713. So only 11 years before this, there's a document which I often refer to as a litmus test of obedience to the papocracy. It was a document that condemned Jansenism and demanded that all clergy and religious sign a formula of obedience to Rome. So all of us who were religious, Sister Maria, sign right here. All of us who are clergy, Deacon Stephen, you need to sign right here, condemning this. So it was a way of getting all of the clergy and religious of the church against this purported heresy, which, if we were to look at it through historical lenses, really is not so, would not be viewed as so heretical today. Just different views. So we have this formulary of obedience in 1713, which was turning certain people against, this whole idea of submitting to the bishop down there on the other side of the mountains. And so various bishops and priests refused to sign it, including, we've talked about them before, the nuns of Port-Royal des Champs in France was a whole convent of nuns who, when they had their meeting together, they sat down and decided, ain't gonna sign it. Are we going to stand together in unity, sisters? Yes, we're going to stand against this thing. And when any bishop or anyone comes to us and says you need to sign it, we're going to say, haven't read it, can't condemn it. Real models of courage out of Port-Royal. At the time that all this was going on now, Utrecht has been without a bishop for over 20 years. Bishops and priests and religious are forced to sign this document condemning something that they've never even heard or read about. And a Paris-born Roman Catholic bishop, whose name is Dominique Marie Varlet, in 1724, is going to give birth to Independent Catholicism. He's a Roman Catholic bishop who's going to consecrate another bishop without Rome's approval. It's going to cause this split where Rome is going to excommunicate him, but also where canon lawyers and others are going to look at it and say, well, the person that he consecrated is a bishop. That person is a valid Catholic bishop, even though you might excommunicate him. He's valid. Shall we talk about him? There's actually an American connection to this Dominique Mary Varlet. He came to the United States, or what was going to be the United States, in 1713 to 1717. He traveled to North America, arrived in Mobile Bay, Alabama, and traveled north to Holy Family Mission in Cahokia, Illinois in 1715. And then on to Quebec after that in Canada, because he was appointed Vicar General for Mississippi and Illinois of the Diocese of Quebec. So to be clear, all parts in the eastern, what is today the United States, belong to the Diocese of Quebec in Canada, and he was now being named the Vicar General to oversee this territory.
So technically east of the Mississippi.
I don't know if I would say that specifically, but certainly east. In September of 1718, he was appointed, the Pope appointed him coadjutor bishop of Babylon, which is modern day Iraq. So now he's in Canada, and they're telling him, oh, by the way, we've just been named bishop in Iraq, future Iraq, right, present day Iraq. And so he goes to Paris in 1718, was consecrated a bishop in 1719, and he left Paris without doing what? Without signing that formulary of obedience like all the bishops and priests and nuns were required to do. Strike one, Dominic Mary. So far, so good? So now he's going to travel on to present-day Iraq, Babylon, but on his way, he passes through Amsterdam. So he's going up from Paris to Amsterdam. Oh, first he stops in Brussels, where he made the mistake of not calling on the internuncio, which was the custom. If you were a bishop, then you at least said, oh, by the way, hey, I'm swinging through town. Want to take me to dinner? Strike two. Dominic Mary failed to do that. Continued on to Amsterdam, where he confirmed 604 people in this place that hadn't had a bishop in over 20 years. Can you imagine being a bishop, stopping through a city and hearing the people say, oh, we are so glad to see you. We have not seen a bishop here in over 20 years, and we have all these people who want to be confirmed. You're the bishop. What do you say? Well, let's see him. Oh, my word, that's a lot of people. Have you gotten these people? Yeah, there were 604. Okay, I'm on my way to Babylon. Why don't we just celebrate a confirmation mass while I'm here? Or 2 or 3. I don't know how many it's going to take to confirm 604 people. They celebrate the confirmation mass. He celebrates it in a diocese outside his own without getting the permission of anyone in the hierarchy. Strike 3. Dominic Mary. On May the 17th, 1719, he was suspended from his episcopal duties, his duty as a bishop, but that news didn't get over to him in Babylon for another year, for 10 months actually, March of 1720. It took 10 months for him to get news that, oh, by the way, he was suspended as a bishop. He returned to Paris, then to Amsterdam, because he's thinking, how am I going to defend myself in the midst of this controversy? And when he went back to Amsterdam, he sought the advice of canonists who said that his suspension was null and void. Rome can't suspend you as a bishop. You've been consecrated a bishop, you're a bishop. In 1723, after Pope Clement died, Pope Clement was the one who formulated that formula of submission in 1713. He died, so Varlet became an appellant against Unigenitus, one of the people who was standing up and saying, I will not sign this. Meanwhile, the Cathedral Chapter of Utrecht in 1723 elected a bishop-elect, because back then the Pope didn't appoint bishops. There were different places that had cathedral chapters that could elect a bishop. And so they elected their bishop. Varlet consulted canon lawyers. They said, no, they have the right to elect their own bishop. And you, as a bishop, if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can consecrate him. Now, in the Roman Catholic tradition, there's a tradition of not one person consecrating another bishop. Usually there are at least 3 bishops. Have you noticed that? Have you gone to any of these ceremonies? 3 bishops all lay hands on the same person so that if one of them, for whatever reason, is ever found to be not valid, there are 2 other backups. Follow me? They say, oh, well, okay, he wasn't valid, but that's okay because there were 2 others. There are always 3. But these canon lawyers said, no, all it takes is one bishop laying hands on another bishop, and that person is validly consecrated a bishop.
Where were these canon lawyers?
These canon lawyers were largely the University of Paris and other canon law faculties throughout Europe.
outside of Rome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So isn't this sounds like a second Reformation?
It is. The difference this time is that the first Reformation was by a Roman Catholic priest, Martin Luther, who Rome looked at and said, you can't lay hands on anyone else because you're not a bishop. This was the first time that we had someone who was a bishop saying, y'all need a bishop. Y'all have the right to elect a bishop. While I'm here, let's give you a bishop. He consecrated the Archbishop of Utrecht and was excommunicated for doing that.
So it's literally just that simple. Once you're a priest or a bishop, you're always, because it's happened in 1724, and I see now that it's still happening where people's faculties are being suspended, so that can happen.
So there are different models. So the Roman Catholic Church has tended to see the Augustinian model. There were two saints who had differing views on these things, Saint Augustine and Saint Cyprian. Maybe we've heard of some of these. Saint Augustine had this notion. He believed that if one person lays hands on another person, then it is valid, is done. Which is why I often joke, if Bishop Joe Vasquez of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Austin comes here this evening and says, hey, Gloria, I got news for you. Come here. I want to lay my hands on you and make you a bishop. Ooh, Gloria is a bishop. Follow me?
He's going to get burned.
And he would be burnt. He would be excommunicated. He would be out for having done that.
No, I'm
She
just
was
talking
so
about talking.
It would be excommunicated from Rome Catholic Church.
There you go. There you go.
And he still can be a bishop in Independent Catholic Church.
But he's still a bishop.
He's still a bishop.
Once a bishop, always a bishop, said Saint Augustine.
Consecrated.
Cyprian had a slightly different view. Cyprian was, you cannot be a priest or a bishop outside of a community. So don't go calling yourself a priest or a bishop if you don't call yourself a shepherd if you don't have sheep. Follow me? A shepherd is a shepherd only in relationship to the sheep. And if you don't have sheep, you're not a shepherd. Got news for you. That was Cyprian. But which of these views won out in the history of the Roman Catholic Church and its theology, its ecclesiology? Augustine. And they appealed to scriptures like Psalm 110. Open your Bibles. What does Psalm 110 say? You are a priest forever, according to the line of Melchizedek. So if you're a priest forever, then we can't say, oh, suddenly if you don't have any sheep, you're no longer a priest. No. If you're a priest forever, then once someone has laid hands on you and you're validly ordained, got news for your Father Jamie. They can excommunicate you if they want, but you're still a priest. You are still a valid priest. And no Roman Catholic person is going to disagree with that. That is the long-standing theology of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, in their language, they may use other misleading phrases, like Bishop Joe Vasquez chose to use the phrase that his people had created for him. Father Jamie's sacraments may not be valid or licit, right? A way to miss it. But he doesn't say his sacraments are not valid. Doesn't say that. So Varlet got himself in trouble time again, but in the end, he had canon lawyers, canonists, who came back and said, no, you are consecrated, and the gentleman that you consecrated, Cornelius van Steenhoven, is now a valid bishop in the church. And he was the first Archbishop of Utrecht, or what we would later come to call the Old Catholic Archbishop of Utrecht. We didn't use the word Old Catholic at that time yet, because we were just all Catholic. But there was this split that happened, where now the church in the Netherlands, and we often refer to it as the Jansenist church in the Netherlands, because this whole Jansenist controversy had come up. So they often refer to this as the so-called Jansenist Church of Utrecht now had its own bishop consecrated by a Roman Catholic bishop. Varlet was not the only Catholic bishop to do this, by the way. You'll hear of other people when we get farther in history, people like Emmanuel Malingo, who only died during this decade. He was a Zambian priest who, after many years of serving as a Roman Catholic Archbishop of Lusaka, Zambia, said, you know what? I think I'm going to get married. And he left the Roman Catholic Church, but he was still a bishop, Archbishop he still had valid consecration, and he consecrated various independent Catholic bishops here in the United States. So now what does that do? Because he has consecrated others, and so now those bishops can go and consecrate others as valid bishops. We continue passing on lines of apostolic succession, such that Father Roy, when he was ordained, he was not ordained by a Roman Catholic bishop, but he was ordained by a bishop who was ordained by another bishop that traces their lines to the Roman Catholic Church. So Father Roy's ordination is as valid as the ordination of any Roman Catholic priest or bishop. And I challenge any Roman Catholic person to take me up on that, to come and debate me on that.
Who would consecrate you as a bishop?
So anyone who is a bishop with lines of apostolic succession could consecrate another bishop.
Yes. I'm asking who.
Who concretely? If I wanted to be a bishop? Bishop John Luft, who came and celebrated confirmations with us in May,
Okay.
right? I'll get down on my knees and he'll put his hands on my head and I'll come to mass and I'll say, oh, by the way, let me tell you what happened yesterday. Right? Archbishop Johnson, maybe you remember Archbishop Johnson. We remember different bishops who've come through here. Archbishop Alan Kemp.
His lines, I've done the research, his lines go back to Arnold Harris Matthew.
Yeah. So it's fascinating. And it's important for us to do this research. Anytime I invite a bishop here, I make sure that they have lands of valid apostolic succession, because I don't want anyone ever coming back and saying, oh, that wasn't valid. Oh, yes, it was. If you got it Holy Family, it was valid. Bringing in a bishop in October, Bishop Pablo Burson, to celebrate with us the sacrament of confirmation. He is as valid as any other Roman Catholic bishop.
So, say for instance, I'm just an example here.
Yeah.
If being that one of the bishops here did confirmation, and a person that wants to get married in a Catholic Roman church, they cannot say it's invalid because he did his confirmation on the Catholic independence. Would they say that? Because I mean, once you get, you want to get married in a Catholic church, they frown about, okay, is it valid that you have documentation, but it's in a different manner instead of the Roman, it's the independence. Catholic
Yeah.
Church.
Most parishes don't make any deal about this, especially outside of Austin. But there are some churches in Austin who choose to make an issue of that. And that's why I always said, if anyone gives you an issue, you let me know who, and I will be at that parish that same day or the next day.
Okay.
But there are some of the challenges. There's a loophole that allows pastors. When I was the pastor at Cristo Rey, I could determine which documents to accept or not when it comes to things like that. And so if I wanted, I could say, Mario, yeah, I'm not gonna accept this. How do I know it was valid? So a lot of it comes down to the decision of local pastors. They will not ever deny the sacrament of baptism. But there are some pastors in Austin who have not accepted confirmation or first communion certificates. And, when we challenge that, the line that we get is that that's their prerogative to accept or not. We've only had that problem here in Austin. Outside of Austin,
So that's something that they still feel they can deny.
pastors do, yes. On what theological grounds? I would love to challenge them, which is why I love visiting their offices and sitting down with them and sometimes even raising my voice with them.
You study boxing.
Don't mess with me. Don't make me put on the glass. Sister Maria.
Are all of the churches in the independent sacramental movement Christian?
Are all of them in the independent sacramental movement Christian? I think largely the answer is yes, because all of us, what distinguishes is that we all have sacraments, and the sacraments are Christian sacraments, But to be honest, there are people within our movement who believe that you can self-identify in different ways. So that, for instance, there's a podcast out there where the bishop speaks with people who self-identify as Catholic and Druid. I don't pretend to get into it. It's not me. But when you have someone who says, I'm Catholic and I'm a Wiccan witch or warlock or however they self-identify, I don't know what to do with that, but I'm not going to argue. I'm also not sure that I'm going out to dinner with you this evening. As I said, I'm not sure that I have enough in common with you. I strongly self-identify as Catholic. And if you self-identify in a different way, then God bless you. There are probably, maybe you'll find others who self-identify in those ways, but that's not me. Dominic Murray, then Dominic Mary, we'll call him. They had elected the bishop in 1723, Cornelius van Steenhoven. He consecrated him in Amsterdam on October the 15th, 1724. So if we wanted, we could say on October the 15th, 2024, happy 300th anniversary, our tricentennial, 300 years ago today, was the first consecration of an independent Catholic bishop. Because once they were excommunicated, they were no longer part of the Roman Catholic Church, but they had valid lines of apostolic succession.
Do we know what the first actual brick and mortar independent Catholic church was here in America, and is it still standing?
We do. We're not going to get up to that history this evening, but that creates a fascinating thing, because what we're going to see is once all these events start happening in 300 years ago, then we're going to start seeing the multiplication of this outside of the Netherlands. First in Germany in 1870, so it's going to take 150 years roughly for it to go from Netherlands to another place. But then after that, we're going to see it going to England, and then more importantly for us, once it's been to one English-speaking country, when it comes to America, this land of independence, it's going to go crazy. And if only we were more organized and have this, what I'm trying to do is bring together all this history, not only for the summer school, but for us to archive online. So that if person wants to learn about the history of Independent Catholicism, there are actually sources online. Because when we first started Holy Family 12 years ago, there was like nothing online. I mean, think about this for a moment. In 10 years of seminary studies and in 10 years as a Roman Catholic priest, I had never once heard of old Catholicism. Never once. It was like these things are just not taught to us in the Roman Catholic seminary system. The Roman Catholic seminary system is going to say, oh, by the way, let me tell you about the old Catholics over in Europe. Never heard of them.
It's because it was rebellious.
Well, even in the last 5 years, I would say the amount of information on independent Catholicism. When I first came, it was literally only stuff that you had released, and now I can go on and it's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, the last 5 years has taken off. A lot of that's due to us here at Holy Family, who sort of like we've been at the tip of the spear. We've led the charge in publishing on independent Catholicism, but others now, we see our friends like Bishop Michelangelo Di Rigo and others online. They're beginning to publish books and find out how easy it is. Father Gianni now publishing books. Others of us who are now starting to get involved. Talking with Father Brett, Father Libardo, and others. We need you publishing books, right?
That's a big threat to Roman Catholics.
Yeah. Some of the issues that were raised by that event then, one was the authority of the Utrecht Cathedral chapter to act, but the Utrecht Cathedral chapter had the right, said canonists at that time, they have the right to elect their own bishop. And they did what was theirs to do. Other issue, the validity of the consecration by a single bishop. What do you mean? It can't be valid. It was just one bishop laying hands on another bishop. Yeah, that's all it takes. That's all it takes.
Was this during the Age of Enlightenment?
This was certainly the Age of Enlightenment. Right, so we're having all sorts of ideas.
Right.
We're starting to think of things in a way differently than we thought of them before. That's why we joke in the Middle Ages, the adage was for lay people, pray, pay, and obey. Now we're in the Enlightenment, and lay people are like, oh, heck no. Especially, we're overthrowing kings and monarchs in certain countries. Follow me?
Right.
Here in the United States of America, we're saying, we don't need to report to a king over in England. And we see those same phenomena happening in the church. And finally, the last theological or ecclesial issue is this whole, which model are we going to follow? The Augustinian model, that you are a priest forever, you lay hands on another person, that person's a priest, or the Cyprianic model that you're only a priest or a bishop within the context of community, which makes a lot of sense. I really like that argument, especially in the Independent Catholic movement. We have so many bishops and priests who don't have communities. I like the model of you can't be a shepherd without sheep. But that's not the history of the church. The tradition of the church is Augustinian. You lay hands on another person, and that person is validly consecrated. You lay hands on Gloria, now she's a bishop. What are you going to do about it? Ready to go forward in time, 150 years to the sham Vatican Council of 1870? Sham is my own word. They call it the Vatican Council. Now we refer to it as Vatican I. Why do we refer to it as Vatican I? Because after that was another Vatican. We called that Vatican II. So we had Vatican I, and now we had Vatican II in the 1960s. Vatican I, 1869 to 70. We say 1869 to 70. It started in December the 8th, 1869. So really, they just started it there. But it was 1870 when all the action happened. So 1870 is the year that we look to when papal infallibility and universal papal jurisdiction, the Pope is head of the universal church, those two issues were ramrodded through this, I call it the sham council, because we're going to see democracy in action here. And it's going to sort of become this, the majority vote wins sort of thing. What happens with votes? You'll notice at our board of directors, we seldom take votes on things unless we're required to by law. Why? Because when you have a vote, you have winners and losers. And if you get 51% of people to vote for something, then it's done. And so what we're going to see at this council is that 51 or a bit more percent of the bishops are going to say, yes, we support these things. And the other bishops are like, oh, heck no. The Bishop of Rome, the Pope, puts his pants on one leg at a time like the rest of us. He is not infallible. But by the end of that council in 1870, the bishops had to decide, are you going to come and vote against this and be on the outs with the system, with the hierarchy? Many of them decided, no, we're just not going to show up for the final vote. Many of them went home before the final vote. And even those who voted against it ended up sort of recanting and trying to get back into the good graces because they wanted to remain the bishops that they were. The story that we tell here in these United States, there was only one U.S. bishop who had the courage to stand up and vote against it. His name was Edward Fitzgerald of Little Rock, Arkansas. But another one who spoke out about it, he left early, chickened out. His name was Peter Kenrick of St. Louis, Missouri. And so he spoke out on it, got back to St. Louis and said, you know what? Okay, I'll accept it. If you want to continue being a bishop here, you got to accept it. He stepped down shortly after that. But either you fall in line and you sing the Mickey Mouse song, you're out. You cannot be part of the Mickey Mouse song and sing the Donald Duck song. You can't do it. If you're going to be part of the Mickey Mouse Club, you have to sing the Mickey Mouse song.
And what does the Roman Catholic Church say now about that? Same thing?
Same thing. The Roman Catholic Church's doctrine is that the Pope is infallible. What's fascinating, let's take a look at the events that are going on here, because all of it comes back to a Pope whose name was Pius IX. And in Italian, Pius is Pio, and ninth is Nono. So in the church, they know him as Pio Nono. Pio IX, love that word. Pio Nono is now the Pope. And in 1854, Pio Nono made a mistake by declaring that Mary, Jesus' mom, was conceived without sin. We know that as the Immaculate Conception. Have you heard of that before, the Immaculate Conception? Mm-hmm. That was invented. He proclaimed it in 1854. It divided the church. Some people said, oh yes, Mary was immaculate. Others said, what? This is one of those new teachings. We need to go back to the ancient beliefs of the church. This church is inventing way too much. And so the Immaculate Conception split the church. So now we had to figure out what to do. And Pius Pio Nono had the brilliant idea. Let's call together all the bishops and have them agree that I am infallible. And that when I made this proclamation in 1854, I was, in fact, infallible. So in 1870, they're going to proclaim papal infallibility. In what year? 1870. Saying that what he did in 1854 was infallible. So he acted infallibly, even before he was infallible. Did you follow me? Our friends over in Utrecht, the old Catholic Church, when we go over to the summer school in Utrecht, they just laugh. They have such a field day when it comes to this. Now, the Pope, even though the Pope wasn't infallible, he declared something infallibly 16 years before,
Well, almost like a monarch.
almost like a monarch. It's true because I said it. Or even worse than monarchy, in the ancient church, the word was Gnosticism. Gnosticism was an early heresy of the church. Gnosticism was that any person had special knowledge, right? Jordan comes to us and said, God told me last night that we all have to wear green to Bible study next week. Okay, now suddenly Jordan has special knowledge from God. What do we do with that? Becky's saying, well, if Jordan says it comes from God, then we all have to wear green next week. And Sister Maria, the rebel that she is saying, yeah, we all love Jordan, but how do we know this is from God? I'm not wearing green next week, Jordan. That's Gnosticism, the belief that God gives special knowledge to certain people. So essentially, infallibility, the challenge with that is that it falls within this ancient heresy of the Pope having special knowledge from God about Mary and her sinless state at birth, and or about the Assumption of Mary. Those are the only two dogmas that have been declared by the Roman Catholic Church. The Immaculate Conception, Mary was born without sin, and Mary was assumed body and spirit into heaven. So Pope Pius IX, Pio IX, had divided the Roman Church with his promulgation of the Immaculate Conception in 1854, making it necessary to state that he was divinely inspired or infallible. He also condemned modernism in 1864, and that was just as terrible a thing because, again, we were in the middle of the Enlightenment. We were having different ideas on things, and Pio IX says, oh, no. Pio IX says, no. We can't have all these modern ideas, right? I will tell you what is the truth. He condemned modernism in 1864 in what he called the syllabus of errors. He convened the Vatican Council on December the 8th, 1869. Do you know when we celebrate the Feast of the Immaculate Conception? December the 8th every year. 137 French, German, and Hungarian bishops opposed the motion for infallibility, including Peter Kenrick of St. Louis and Edward Fitzgerald of Little Rock. The Pope changed the rules of the Vatican Council to facilitate the dispatch of business, and thus allowing the presiding officer to shut anyone down at any time. So when Adrian starts talking against infallibility, shut him down. You are out of order. Sit down.
I'm used to it.
So back at the Vatican Council, they would take initial votes, like straw votes, to see where people were standing on a certain issue before the final vote. In the straw vote, 62.5% of the bishops favored papal infallibility. Many of the opposing bishops left the council after that. They could see the writing on the wall, right? Why should we stay when we're going to be asked to support something that 60% of us, 3 out of every 5 do support, but the other 2 out of 5, there's no chance. Only 2 remaining bishops voted against it. On the same day as the final vote, France declared war on Prussia, thus thrusting Europe into the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. And because the war began on the same day as the vote. What happens when a war breaks out? Boom, everyone heads out of town to go back to their home country, which is why at Vatican II, the first order of business at Vatican II, once they came into session, was to declare this council ended, because this council ended in 1870, but no one ever declared it finished. So in the early 1960s, when they convened for Vatican II, okay, what's on the agenda today? Well, let's first declare that Vatican I, as we're going to come to call it, but the First Vatican Council is ended, and we can start a new Vatican Council. Because no one ever said, oh, by the way, this is over. It's sort of like war broke out that day, and suddenly bishops started saying, oh, you know what? I'm heading home. I'm heading home too. Oh, so am I. Oh, wait a minute. There's no one left at this council.
To validate Vatican II.
So 1870, the Pope is declared infallible and head of the universal church. Again, these are novel concepts. These were new teachings. We never believed these things. The Pope is the head of the whole church.
How can you become?
That's crazy. We're going back to the old, the ancient way, what our ancient Catholic and ancient Christian ancestors believed. We're going to go back to those old beliefs, and we're going to call ourselves something different. In 1871, the next year, is when we're going to start seeing them calling themselves Old Catholics. They're going to gather in Germany for the first Old Catholic Congress, and they're going to declare, this is what we as Old Catholics believe. Questions, comments as we hear this history? It's, if you're hearing it for the first time, it may be something that it's like drinking out of a fire hose, a lot to be able to digest. If you've heard it a time or two, the more that you hear it, the more you just think, we live in a wonderfully flawed and human church. The church is like any other institution. There's such great things that you can say about institutions, about bringing people together for the sake of organizing and power and influence. But it's a human organization just like any other, filled with human beings and their personalities, and yes, filled with politics. Sister Maria?
I'm not sure if I explain this right to people, but this is what I tell them about independent. Like when they ask, what does that mean for our church? I'm like, well, we're inclusive of everybody, but we maintain the same liturgy because it's traditional. And what I tell them is we're in hopes that someday we'll be unified with all the Catholic Church when they come around and become inclusive.
Yeah.
So
If and when we start hearing news, today we're hearing news of Pope Francis using the F word twice, a word that rhymes with maggot, in referring to the LGBTQ priests and seminarians in Italy. Twice in a month, he's using derogatory terms like that. So if and when they ever come around to this. What I love hearing is how different people refer to us. Within our movement, there are some who refer to us as Vatican-free Catholics. When Roman Catholics hear that, they can understand what that is. Oh, they're Vatican-free Catholics. Oh, they're Catholics. They're just not a part of the Vatican, the church that's connected to the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked at our last summer school, which is why we had it printed onto T-shirts. One of our deacons, now a priest in Maryland, said, the way that I explain who we are to non-Catholics is that we are the cool Catholics who love people the way that God created them. They're just like, that's really cool. That's profound. Deacon Molina said that. I just thought that's who we are. We are the cool Catholics. Not the stuffy old Catholics, not your grandparents' Catholics. We're the cool Catholics who would do what Jesus would do. Ask yourself for a moment, would Jesus exclude certain people for certain reasons? He's the one who sat down with the woman at the well. He's the one who appeared to Mary Magdalene after his resurrection. Enough for one evening? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and forever shall be, a world without end. Amen. Have a good night.